Thanks very much. I wear a lot of hats in the theater. Translation's part of a lot of them. So I wanted to talk a little personally about its effect on me. As a writer, I'm fascinated by translation as a subject matter. I think it's a rich starting point to talk about identity, passion, betrayal, and power. This is what happens, for example, and this is a germ of a play idea I have, with simultaneous translation at the UN. Notice the top level, when a French speaker addresses the assembly, translated into all the major other languages, but to get to Chinese, they are first translated into English, relayed into Chinese, all this happening while the speaker is still talking. These people are rock stars, an amazing thing I'd like to write about. I did write the opera The Translator with composer David Ogborn. In an Abu Ghraib-like military prison, a young soldier is interpreting for detainees being interrogated and tortured. I wanted to look at questions of what is your loyalty when you are a human bridge between cultures in conflict? In Carmen Aguirre's The Refugee Hotel, I acted the part of a Canadian who is trying to help Chilean refugees, even though they don't speak each other's language. She's a comic character, but I loved the exploration of the parts of intercultural communication that are beyond language. How did I become a dramatic translator? When I went to this French immersion high school, I spoke no word of French. While there, I picked up the language, but also a love of the French literature and culture that stayed with me for my whole life. I tried to keep that aspect of my life going as a young actor in Toronto, partly through developing a sideline as a commercial translator. My clients included TFO, the educational channel in Ontario, and I did everything from their internal memos to website, and honed my technical skills as a translator. I was also falling in love with Quebecois theater, both in translation in English and in going to Montreal. You may be familiar with the imagistic brilliance of Robert Lepage or Michel Tremblay's rich characters, language, humor, but there was so much more to Quebec theater that wasn't coming through, and I felt like I could make a contribution by transmitting more of it into English. So when I got an opportunity to go to the Tadoussac translation residency in Eastern Quebec, I jumped at it. Tadoussac is kind of ground zero of theatrical translation in all directions in Canada, and there I worked under Linda Gaborio, one of our premier translators, including of the work of Michel Tremblay and a lot of the heavy hitters of Quebec drama. Linda taught me about translation in a theatrical sense, so many other questions that I'd come across in my commercial translation, such as, what is the voice of a particular author, even of a particular character? How do you reflect that in translation? For example, in Philippe Soldevilla's Tales of the Moon, he's writing about Spain after the Civil War, his grandfather's story, and he wanted a sense of foreignness to the language. How do you achieve that sense of period and another language without sounding stilted and awkward? At the Banff Center, talking with Sébastien Harrison, whose play From Alaska I was translating, that's him on the right, we talked about the difference in training between English language actors oriented toward action and motivation and character, and French language actors more trained in rhetoric, image, language. Hélène Duchamp's Baobab is my most produced translation, even though just by the one company. They've toured it throughout North America. I've worked with Hélène on 3 different plays. Having an ongoing relationship between one author and translator is very important because you get a shared language and a trust. Frank Hybert, in the top right, in this translation masterclass in Montreal, taught me about the concept of the act of language. So in a play, the author's intention and what's happening in the scene can be as important as what the actual words are. An example of how this works, when I was translating Louise Bombardier's My Mother Dog, there's a scene where a mother is in hospital, her colostomy bag explodes. She's furious and humiliated, trying to get her daughter to help her, and she screams at her, aide-moi donc, tête évaporée, or literally, come on, help me, you scatterbrain. That's literal, but the English is so much weaker than the French. I put myself in her position. What is the woman Louise created, and how would she be handling the situation? And I came up with the following: get your head out of your bleep and help me, which is much more vulgar than the original, but both Louise and the actress agreed it had the force of the original, and it is what the character would say if she were speaking in English, which, since that was basically Louise's mother, I was really glad that she approved. Opium 37, Catherine Léger's play about the Paris intellectuals in the 30s, referenced the works of artists like Anaïs Nin and Artaud. So I consulted not only their works in French, but also in English, so that for an English reader or audience, the references to their works would have that familiar feel of key phrases popping out. In After Me, by Christian Bégin, I transposed the action from Abitibi, Quebec, to the Cariboo region of BC, which technically is more of an adaptation than a translation, but Christian said he wanted the sense that this could be happening in a snowed-in motel anywhere. So I wanted that sense of universality. In Rebecca Derasp's 2 ans de votre vie, literally 2 years of your life, it's a rom-com, and the title in English sounds more like a prison sentence. So I went with You Are Happy, a way of referencing the character's obsession with how society is seeing them. This is what Google Translate does with Aide-moi donc, tête évaporée. As you can see, it's a miraculous tool, but not great on the questions we're talking about: authorial voice, colloquialism, humor, style, which is great for me because I might have a job for a few years yet. Thank you.